Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Samuel Mays, Director of Projects for Middle East for UAP. I'm really pleased to welcome you all here tonight to join us for Public Art Matters, the first seminar session of this three-day event presented by UAP. UAP are a global public art consultancy and manufacturer that has been operating in the Middle East region since 2009. And that was our first project in Kingdom, up at Koust, where we had a public art program. UAP's evening seminar program is supported by a three-day artist workshop on public art, from inspiration, ideation, to implementation, and all the practical tools in between. UAP are makers, spanning art, architecture design, environments, and everything in between, whether it's permanent or temporary. We make incredible things with incredible creatives all over the world. We have design studios, workshops and foundries, robotics and innovation hubs in Brisbane, Australia, Shanghai, China, and New York in the States, and are supported by an international network of curators, thought leaders, engineers, and installers. But front and centre, we are collaborators. And we are so pleased to be here at the Diriyah Contemporary Art Biennale to connect with you on this subject, which is very close to our hearts. Tonight's session will lay the foundation on our understanding of public art and why it is important to us. Tomorrow evening, we'll then explore the role of public art within the broader cultural framework. And on the third night, we will discuss how artists can exploit next generation technologies to extend their creative practice. Our format tonight will begin with a presentation by Dr. Chetana Andary, a senior consultant at UAP. And following her talk, she'll be joined by Sarah Collcott, Director of Arts Consultancy for Constantine KSA, curator and art historian with over 30 years of international experience. She'll also be joined by Michaela Hartland, senior curator at UAP. Following the talks, we're looking forward to a lively Q&A session, so please hold on to any thoughts and questions that you may have. So, by introduction, Dr. Chetana Andary has been an artist, curator, policymaker and CEO spanning a 30-year career dedicated to integrating art into our daily lives. Currently, she's the chair of the Creative Arts Research Institute at Griffith University in Queensland, Australia, and chair of Artisan, an organisation blurring the boundaries between art, craft, design for makers, audience and government policy. Her presentation tonight will also draw upon her doctoral thesis titled Curating Place, Public Art and City Identity. Please welcome Dr. Chetana.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here tonight in Riyadh. It's been 3 years since I've been here and the city has changed amazingly. What a joy it is to come to the Biennale and to see the incredible artworks that are on display. Saudi artists, you should be proud. We are so pleased to be here. So tonight's presentation is why public art matters. When you put the word public in front of art, you change its meaning. It is by very definition public, accessible to anyone, anytime, almost everywhere and anywhere. It intersects with other aspects of our daily lives, from the drive to work to the local plaza or the playground. Public art, with its ability to reach beyond the gallery walls, is that key driver for economic development, livability, and creative industry competitiveness. And today, it's curated to highlight a local advantage on the global stage. This publicness means that our society is represented in a powerful and positive way. And tonight, this presentation is going to look at what is public art, how does it contribute to our identity, and what are the impacts and benefits. One of the most fundamental aspects of public art is its ability to elevate the identity of its place. And by association, the identity of a nation and its people. It engages with this multiplicity of disciplines from city planning, tourism, architecture, urban design, social and cultural policy, environmental and sustainable studies. Just to name a few, really, it's all about city shaping. It is deeply embedded in the way we make our cities. And now with new technologies and the prevalence of high-speed internet, social media has allowed us to beam this identity to anyone, anywhere, beyond our borders. Public art can facilitate these unlikely encounters, encouraging us to stay and experience a place with other people, and making a place friendlier, which, as we know after this pandemic, this opportunity to socialise with each other is something we so desperately desire. Accessible art that is functional is engaging and clever, and it breaks down these barriers between art that brings us together and art that isolates. This is a way of starting conversations about being together in a place to affect our health and well-being. So from these everyday encounters, it's also the monumental experiences that public art are bringing us today. And this is the world's most controversial duck. Rubber duck has graced over 20 countries and become one of the world's most recognisable artworks. It's appealing because we understand it. It's part of our childhood. It's that domestic, private home, that feeling of family and childhood. But when we share it with each other and we build this collective memory, we create a time and a place that we connect not just to each other, but to ourselves, that deep part of being human. This spectacle advertises the city, though, as an event location, and it turns it into a place of entertainment. Drawing out the familiar and the important, these traditional concepts of who we are and how we represent ourselves in contemporary art is all about articulating a new way of seeing ourselves. Entering that territory of urban environmental psychology, geography and urban economics, this relationship between the internal psychology and the social processes intersect with physical form. But at its very basic, public art's about stories, who we are, and what is meaningful to us. I love this work by Dutch artist Florentine Hofman, who was also the artist of the rubber duck. This work is installed in China, and it tells the story of an endangered species, obviously the panda, and the ongoing conservation efforts. It's clever, it's engaging, it's a selfie moment. It's a way to actually engage together in a place doing something we love doing, which is sharing our stories. It's a social commentary piece that uses the selfie stick, held by the panda with a programmed LED screen with an embedded camera emulating a real phone. Visitors are encouraged to take their selfies via the custom-developed app. So why do we want art in public places? This question of why always excites me, that curiosity and imagination of why are we interested in art? What is it that moves us to create new things? And it's this theory by Maslow, which was adopted by scholars and urbanists, is a theory of human motivation, our needs, where he looks at this pyramid starting from that psychological, that physiological and psychological need at the bottom of the pyramid just to survive. And as these needs are met and we move up this hierarchy, we reach the very pinnacle, which is self-actualisation, the way we represent ourselves, the way we achieve our full potential as a human. This is our creativity. This is why we don't live in the same nest. We all have different homes, different clothes, different houses. This need to express ourselves as part of being human. And perhaps it's why art is so important to us and why we want it in our public lives. So public art is in its place. And what is a place other than a collection of physical forms and social interactions and economic transactions? Places are the backdrop of many of life's important events, a place where friendships are formed, families celebrate together, and dreams are pursued. This model is helpful in thinking about how we read a place, and by association, how public art can help us interpret the identity of a place and how we behave in that site. We understand places by what we see, what we feel, and what we experience, and we build this mental map that tells us this is how we navigate the place. This is what occurs there. So, for example, a work where there's a place where there's, the tall, modern architectural towers, the activity is mainly business people. It may look a bit serious and civic, perhaps a little dull. No one's having very much fun. And you might think that the client would put in a very corporate-looking sculpture to talk about the wealth and power of a place. But this is where artists go beyond. They go beyond what you would expect. They go beyond because they imagine a new way, and they help us see our lives in a completely different format. Artist Florentine Hoffman has developed this beautiful bird, colourful, alive, adorned with a party hat. He asks us to look up from our daily busy lives, to look up and see the sky, to look up and notice nature, and notice that we are part of a bigger world. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about where public art came from in terms of its historical aspect. Obviously, the statues and monuments that we installed in public places that commemorate those great moments and people in time, were sculptural works were commissioned to market the wealth and power of the person or country. They told a specific story about a specific event in a specific time. These sculptures were really made by master craftsmen, not really by artists. They weren't about self-expression or imagination or even ideas. They had to fit a very tight design brief, and they don't fit within our contemporary interpretation of art. And this shift from this statue and monumental form really sort of occurred around the 1930s, and the first use of the word public art happened with President Roosevelt after the Great Depression, when he created a new visionary economic policy called the New Deal. And this included the Public Works of Art project. So as well as creating thousands of jobs for artists, it also served a larger purpose because it gave Americans, all Americans, access to art and culture in their public places. The New Deal brought artwork out of the gallery and put it into the street. And it created hundreds of thousands of paintings, prints, drawings and sculpture, which continue to adorn the public buildings today. Environmental land art appeared around the 60s, emphasising space, place and site. It expanded this idea of public art from an object to a site, and is probably the beginning of this term that we use now, site-specific art, specific to the site. And it's art that is now inspired by the very place, using the place, the materials, the concepts, the history and tradition, and then deriving its meaning from that site. Today, though, public art covers this myriad of creative outputs. Its very natural hybridity of media, technology and practice has infused public art with a breadth of forms difficult really to classify into a neat category. From integrated art, the fabric of a building or pavement, standalone sculptures, functional art furniture, community projects, performance, and ephemeral art that literally can disappear over time. For me, I've found it easy to position public art within three distinct forms as a sort of a conceptual approach. The first, as I mentioned, is site-specific, and this, as its title implies, is artwork designed for that site, integrated with the environment, part of the structure and activity of the place. And conceptually, it relates to that place. It can't go anywhere else. And secondly, the artworks which we call universal. These are universal ideas. They're concepts that can be understood and interpreted by anyone, regardless of age, demographic or location. They can be positioned across multiple sites, different countries, beautifying the environment and uniting us under these ideas of universality. And then there's artainment. I love this term. This is a new way to engage art through entertainment. This is art that brings people onto the street, people who may never have gone into a gallery before, but they are entertained by the art. They are included and attracted. Artainment is often temporary art, often event-based commissions. They're incredibly exciting, bringing people together. And because they are temporary, they're also a great way to raise ideas and challenge perhaps ways we couldn't if that was permanent. So every year, the London think tank ICSIA conducts a survey to understand the aims behind why public art is commissioned. The three most quoted reasons are to create identity, beautify the environment, and social inclusion. Of these three, though, it's identity, for me, that is at its heart and soul of who we are. This process of creating identity with public art is a complex business. It's not developed in isolation. This multifaceted environment that we work in not only includes the place and its context, the client and its aims, and the artists who may or not have any experience working outside the gallery on what in many cases can be a very large construction project. And whilst the public is truly the ultimate client, they're often not aware of the artwork until it comes. There are often competing goals and objectives in public art, and it is the role of the curator to bring that voice to the publicness of the place, support the artist to think beyond the gallery wall, and discuss the logistics like budget programming and construction issues with the client. But this is an example of when that type of project can go wrong. Richard Serra's titled Arc, a massive public sculpture, was installed outside of government buildings in Federal Plaza in New York in 1981, which was controversially removed in 1989 for its failure to engage people. It was, in effect, a wall of steel, 12 feet high and 120 feet long. But the interesting thing about titled Arc was that Richard Serra spent a lot of time in this plaza, and he analysed it before designing the work, and he really developed it with its shape, its dimensions, its position. After noticing the way people moved quickly and hurriedly through the space, he wanted to slow them down. He wanted to purposefully redirect the traffic, not just as an annoyance, but to alter our perceptive reality of place and of the people who use the site. He wanted them to stop and notice their surroundings and to think about where they were passing through, and it was radical, a subversive gesture, and it was intended to upset normal activities, and it worked. Nothing was done to prepare the people for the arrival of Tilted Arc. The reaction of office workers was immense. It was all negative. Within a very short time, the public outcry petitioned for this ugly, divisive, oppressive artwork to be removed, and in 1989, it was taken down. This example by Portuguese artist Vils was inspired by the photography of William Thesiger, who famously captured Bedouin portraiture in the 50s. Vils managed to capture the identity of the individual within the identity of the nation in City Walk in Dubai. Carved from the very fabric, the material of the wall, this image reaches back in tradition to bring us a modern version of who we are. This, to me, is about identity. And I can't not put in this slide about theming. One of the biggest issues we have as artists and as nation builders when we're looking at our creative expression is this understanding between what is art and what is themes. We know street art has taken off all over the world. It's quick, it's cheap, it's accessible, it's great for marketing a place. But is it creating this sort of sameness? This work by Nick Walker, who's a British graffiti artist, he used a particular bowler-featured gentleman, he calls him a vandal. He puts this stencil graffiti, as you can see, in many places over the world. But what does it tell you about a place? How does it express who we are and that locale? What is the soul and meaning of work that doesn't actually relate to the very environment it's in? So I'd just like to stop for a minute and ask you to think of a place in a city that you really love, that has meaning to you. A place that has a particular distinct identity, one you couldn't find anywhere else. You remember this place fondly, you probably tell other people to go there. Just picture, what does this place look like? What happens there? How do you feel? Why does it stand out in your memory? Public art and place identity has been explored through two theories: placemaking and brand marketing. Placemaking has arisen from this process to unlock that unique value of place. It's multifaceted, interdisciplinary. It's about the planning, design and management to bring that local vernacular into the play of the senses. And on the other end of the spectrum is the current marketing of city branding. City marketing, or destination marketing, is currently being referred to, is defined as like an entrepreneurial marketing of a place for the consumption to engender a place with an identity through imagery. So placemaking has this intrinsic condition of place history activity. It talks about the aspirations of the community and how they participate. It is active and dynamic. It invites people to be part of it, to be inside it, to include themselves within it. City in the Grass includes a sculptural intervention that mimics an undulating carpet and a cityscape crafted from wood, aluminium and coloured sand. This is placemaking that tells a story, but challenges the idea of art as a static object. Another example of placemaking is this work located in Shanghai. The concept is grounded in the mythology of red thread of fate, an invisible red cord that connects those who are destined to meet one another. Red threads that are commonly used in Chinese wedding ceremonies, where a red string is tied from the groom to the bride, signifying that connection of a new couple. And functional art, incorporating not just the spirit of the place and not just your average seat. Designed by artist Robert Andrew, grounded in the present, stands opposite a stand of heritage-listed fig trees, excuse me, incorporating a space for seating. And it invites you to be part of the artwork, but think about what you're actually grounded in. So brand marketing, as we said, finding that entrepreneurial way of commercial appeal, one place to another place, proposes three tactics to brand a city in the same vein as corporate branding. It's incorporating image, identity and communication. Signature structures, the big iconic form, the colourful new object. Personality branding is linked to that celebrity nature of a person. So think of Elvis from Memphis or Gaudi's Barcelona. And event hallmarking is very much what we talked about before, like artainment. This is about bringing attention to a city such as, Venice Biennale, the World Expo, the Olympics. And art and culture provide very rich imagery for promotion, for brand marketing, using public art as a new sort of spectacle to activate the public realm. Anthony Gormley's The Angel of the North has become such a successful brand emblem for Gateshead in the UK that it is now being listed as the icon of England, one of the most talked about and recognisable pieces of public art ever produced. Standing at 20 metres tall with a wingspan of 54 metres, this signature structure was commissioned to become a figurehead. Gormley describes the image of the angel as multifunctional, a reminder of the industrial history of the site, beneath which miners had worked for centuries, and as a reference to the future, the transition to the information age. And we all know Adishka Kapoor's Cloud Gate, colloquially known as the Bean. This transformed Millennium Park in Chicago. The Indian-born British artist was well known for his large-scale outdoor works, several which already had highly reflective surfaces. This work, however, is the most referenced artwork online, and it shows its ability to contribute to the place economy rather than the critique as an artwork. It is credited as attracting over 5 million visitors a year, with many or more obviously shared online. So event hallmarking, or artainment, blurs that boundaries of exciting dynamic art with the event that captivates and transforms the city. The city itself becomes the artwork. And by aligning the city with art, it then associates itself with imagination and creativity, globalism and activation, bringing attention to itself. And you may recognise this artwork by Janet Eckelman, as I understand there is currently one of her amazing artworks here in Jeddah, or in Jeddah. These lightweight suspended installations are a symbol of interconnectedness because they're composed of these countless intertwined fibres where every single knot moves in the wind. The location of every other knot in the sculpture surfaces is changed in an ever unfolding dance made by this creation with the forces of nature. For me, it is where these two practices intersect that I contend is where that sweet spot is for public art and place identity. Storytelling is this critical component of both of these. It encapsulates this character. It makes tacit images that attract people and gives them a meaning to stay. Public art builds these stories. So how do we measure the value of these stories? Being so multi-layered, it's intangible measures such as social inclusion, that happiness factor, the friendliness of a place, and the tangible, often evidence quantitative return on investment in economic terms. For example, a government might, by seeking greater social harmony, use inclusion and beautification of a place as a way to measure its success. Cultural tourism and brand identity may be measured by Instagram uploads, social media shares and hotel occupancy. And a private developer may be seeking more quantifiable return on investment of money, time and energy, an increase in property value, retail sales. But whatever the measure is, attracting people is only half the effort. It's all about retaining them. In a study as to why people didn't leave their location, scholars Florida and Melander describe the psychology of why some places fail and others succeed. And they found that beauty, combined with that strong connection to community, were more important than economic factors. And they suggest this sort of resembles that Maslow-like theory, where individuals' satisfaction increases as communities meet those different levels of higher order needs. Renowned Swiss artist Ugo Rondinoni's colourful large-scale public artwork, 7 Magic Mountains, is an exhibition located in the desert outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. 7 30 to 35 metre high day-glow totems comprised of painted, locally sourced boulders. It's visible across the desert landscape, physically and symbolically midway between the natural and the artificial. This artwork was so successful, it's gone from being a temporary public artwork now to a permanent artwork. In fact, there's a whole entrepreneurial activity of tour guides who take people from Los Angeles just to go and see the artwork in the desert. Nothing else exists there but the artwork. This is destination to the extreme. Field of Light by Bruce Munro. Oh, sorry. There we go. Field of Light by Bruce Munro is a fibre optic work spreading across the space of 4 football fields. It has 50,000 light bulbs installed. Run by solar energy, it's constantly changing colour. And whilst it looks fabulous from afar, it's actually the opportunity to walk within the light at that ground level that attracts visitors to the Central Australian desert. Oh, sorry. And Burn 1660 is a historical event which went online. This is about an artwork designed for the impact of social media. The project was presented by Artichoke in 2016 with artist David Best, and it was, as I said, specifically designed to recognise that a live audience participation had a maximum capacity of 50,000 people along the Thames. And so they used digital channels to reach a staggering audience of 3.8 million viewing the burn and a wider content created reaching 6.7 million. And of course it didn't finish there as fans continued to spread the word by social media. It was located on a barge on the River Thames, set alight to mark the 350th anniversary of the Great Fire of London as a climatic finale of a week-long festival. And I think I go back to this one, the city of Spartanburg. In 2015, the city of Spartanburg was selected to take part in Bloomberg Philanthropic Public Art Challenge, with the goal to take a more strategic view towards public art and its role in convening partnerships, sparking dialogue and fuelling local economies. For over a year, digital media artist Erwin Reddle had unprecedented access to the local community. He got to talk, meet, listen and dream with the people who lived there. He was invited to participate not just as a lead artist, but as an ideas generator. The project demonstrated how art and artists can help break down barriers, allowing residents who have traditionally felt isolated from the arts to become part of the actual process. His own work was a 100-metre light arts installation on a lake, and it reintroduced a hidden and lost place for the community by providing a new attraction. Artists working with the community can facilitate this new understanding of identity, a very personal and socially active attachment to one's community. A study done by the Knights Foundation Soul of the community surveyed some 43,000 people in 43 cities and found that social offerings, openness and welcomeness, and importantly the aesthetics of a place, its art, parks and green spaces, ranked higher than education, safety and the local economy, again, as a driver of attachment. I've always been very interested in how we measure value and trying to come up with an equation to measure it. How do we measure the value of seeing a child smile at great art? How do we measure people connecting in a public place, or the value of a distinct and unique identity? How do we measure experience? These are critical questions of what we ask ourselves in designing places for people. Public art gives us these clues to make meaning, to help connect us to that very soul of who we are. So when we consider public art, we're considering not just what sort of place do we want, but linking it to what sort of people do we want to be? So this presentation today is really exploring about what is public art and identity, its impacts and benefits, and how we can bring people together in public places. This artwork by Judy Watson is installed at the entrance of Queensland Gallery of Modern Art. I just want to show you a quick video of the work. Thank you very much. Hot seat. Hello, is this on? It is. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. Tonight I'm really pleased to welcome Sarah Collcott, who is Director with Constantine Art Services and an art historian, and my colleague, Senior Curator at UAP, Michaela Hartland. So we wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the issues that happen around curating places and how we curate public art, which is quite different from curating within the gallery space. And so firstly, I'll start with you, Sarah, and ask you if you can tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be a public art curator, and how different the work is that you do from gallery curating to place curating.
Of course, thank you. Is this working? Oh, automatically, great. Hello everybody, good evening. Thank you for that question. Actually, I think maybe winding back a little bit is that when I set off to university at first, I didn't even know this job existed. In fact, I don't think any of our jobs existed, at that point. And I had this very clear path that, I'd study, I was studying history of art, old masters, and I've literally gone from a 180 on that, from working and curating in galleries where you'd have to ring the doorbell to go in, so you'd already created that barrier, although beautiful artworks in there, but there was that exclusion to some extent to only those that were comfortable to go into gallery spaces, to working in the public realm. And it wasn't a direct path. It was all by accident more than anything. As larger scale works are created, and very much art in the public realm was looked down upon. It was really not considered, the most interesting form of art, because actually public art isn't an art form. It's a principle. Where the involvement of artists adds to the identity, appreciation, understanding, enhancement of the public realm. And so now very much, as you were obviously highlighting here, it's about this site specificity. It would help if it was an easier word. But where there's an element of the skills of the artists that work in the public realm are so very different, aren't they, to those in the gallery, where they have to understand the pragmatics of working as part of a team. It's not a work in like a studio practice. So many have both sides of that, so that they have their own sort of form of art that they can work, and I love seeing that. And then there's this sort of this parallel existence where they'll collaborate, listen, and work with teams. And I know that we've had conversations where we definitely think that it only comes through collaboration when something's really successful in the public realm.
Yeah, it's a highly collaborative process, isn't it? Being an artist and a public artist.
And curators as
yes,
well.
and curators, yeah.
So it then sort of turns into the more sort of academic side of the public art, where you're instilling with the developers and those delivering and commissioning the work, and advocating best practice principles so that artists are best supported. So it's really taken it to a completely different direction. But just wanted to pick up on one of the projects that you highlighted here in Lumiere, and then sort of the economics of public art and art in the public realm, where Lumiere actually was first in Durham, in the north of the UK, and it's a beautiful but small city. And when Lumiere was first installed in various different locations, and it has quite a different feel to it than the scale of London. Literally, they have the streets sectioned off. You go that side or that side, and you trail through. And it is the most fantastic atmosphere there. And I won't name the city, but one city was approached by Artichoke, who do Lumiere, and where the founders actually lived. And the city said, no, we'll just lose so much money having something like that. And we're not going to put money in. Oh. And forgive me, but I now can't remember the figures. But the success of Durham was phenomenal. People were literally traveling long distances to go. And it's a real joy to see the fact that it's so inclusive that people will make that trip to be involved in the arts, in the public realm. I know you've commissioned quite a few things like that as well.
Yeah, it really has the potential, public art, to draw people to places and to make that destination, doesn't it? People must see and get there before, especially with temporary works, before it finishes, so you can experience it.
Yeah. And then people have this amazing sense of ownership about work as well. Yeah. I worked on one development in London, and it was quite a deprived area, and it was going through a major regeneration. And so the curators and artists, we were fortunately brought in pre-master planning. So we were able to hold conversations with people, but we were able to reach out to community members who, through artists, and engaging and asking questions, because if a developer goes or a large company goes, communities feel there's an agenda and they don't want to talk and they won't share their stories, and even if it's something, just amusing and or special about a place. And there was this particularly ugly sculpture that had been sort of absorbed by this growing council estate, really. And I thought we'd move it. It's bronze, and we thought perhaps we'd relocate it discreetly. Yeah. And there's love for this piece. It's become a meeting place. People say, I'll meet you at the Cow, we can go for coffee, or then we'll get the bus, And they didn't even want it moved. Wow. So there's a real pride in
that attachment to it, that builds over time.
It grows.
Yeah.
And there were local people, who'd only just moved in, who knew it. Yeah. And then there were others who'd been there 50 years. This was an estate that had been built where people came from the slums of East End to sort of more into it's near Richmond Park, actually. And so it was just a very, very well-loved piece of work that sort of was the essence of so much that had changed there. Wow.
Mm. I think it's a really interesting segue into a question I wanted to ask Michaela. Michaela did her Masters in Art in Public Realm at RMIT University. And one of the projects that she worked on was actually looking at those places that are unloved in a city and how artists can change the way we see a place and how we feel about it. Michaela, could you tell us a bit about that project? Because I just love this one.
Yeah, sure. So part of my master's thesis at RMIT, I was involved in a year-long research project, and it was supported by the university and the local council, which was the City of Melbourne in Australia. And Melbourne, I'm not sure if you know, but is renowned as a city that has incredible laneways that run through the streets, and it has this real laneway culture and vibe. And there was this one particular laneway that was people felt unsafe going in it. It was quite dark. There were some teenagers that were misbehaving in there sometimes, and it was just a place that people didn't want to visit. So it was the perfect location to do our research project and look at whether art has the potential to shift people's perception of space and in this case make places feel safer. So we worked with 5 artists over a year and they all had socially engaged practices. There were 3 performance artists. So they spent a lot of time in the laneway, maybe weeks or months even, engaging with the local community, doing live performances, dressing up as different characters and engaging and asking questions and understanding why people enjoyed kind of going around these city streets and being in the laneway. There was one artist who has a digital practice, so she set up a green screen within the laneway and the community were invited to participate. They walked kind of in front of the green screen and did dances and performances, and then at night time when the laneway felt a little bit unsafe to people, she projected her artwork of people dancing around onto the walls of the laneway. And then the 5th artist, he came from a street art background and he actually wanted to take over the entire space. So he did a very bold move and painted the entire laneway this baby blue colour. So it was the ground of the laneway, the huge rubbish bins because it was in the city, the rubbish, and up and down the laneway walls. So the entire space of this laneway blue, and people were kind of watching in anticipation. It took, I think, a little bit of time, like it was a delayed kind of process, and it took about just over half a day. But when the paint dried and people were eager to rush into this space, people were even taking their wedding photographs outside this new kind of blue laneway. And we came back the next day and artists overnight had come in and started to create their own artworks in the space, and they'd done beautiful works on top of this kind of blue immersive space that you could walk through. There were groups of school children that were walking through and families, and this real discussion about this place. And I think what was really interesting was the way in which public art opened up this place for multiple communities to have ownership over it. So they no longer felt scared to be there. They felt welcome, like they were able to be present and experience the place as well. So it was a really great project and really kind of, in this instance, proved that public art does and can have that ability to really shift our perception of our urban environments and in this case, a sense of safety in the laneway.
What's really lovely about this project is we often think of public art as being large and flashy and spectacle, and yet these very small, quiet interactions and interventions can actually really change the way we go about our world. And I'm hoping that, you know, tonight's discussion and the presentation sort of really explores and expands that notion of what public art actually is. That where we originally saw it as, you know, the sculpture on a plinth, is actually now morphed through that very hybridity that artists bring, that transposition of practice that takes us from, you know, the everyday into this world of imagination. I'd like to ask if anyone's got any questions that they would like to ask us. Very quiet. Yes. Would you like this?
Yeah.
In relation to Saudi Arabia, I believe that there's a lot of focus on ephemeral public art, and to me it's extremely concerning because I believe we are laying the foundations now of all sorts of art, not just public art. So I don't think we can afford to focus on ephemeral experiences when we don't have the proper infrastructure that will last generations to come. What's your opinion about that?
Can I jump in? I've now lived here in Riyadh for a year, which I think, and I've loved every minute of it, but I'm still considered new. So I'm always learning, but I agree, there's an awful lot of ephemeral. I know that there's, obviously we have someone this evening as well who's going to be delivering some very exciting, permanent and temporary, public art programs. But there's always been this word everywhere, opportunity, which is which can be wonderful and terrible, because there are so many opportunities here to deliver this. But often these opportunities keep going to the same people who've delivered something, had that, being able to deliver something permanent, of scale, of a particular material. And there's just like every day, there's more and more talent that I'm sort of learning about as well. But it then comes down to the unfortunate side of, I know you've been doing your workshops today, to help this, is that we're not building in time to allow, everybody's working on these tight term frames, and this is everywhere, not just here, and we need to build in the time for early career and mid-career artists who've not yet had that opportunity to produce work of scale and material. I think there's a real desire. I can see that there's this best practice principle really sort of focused in. It's just making sure it gets delivered. But I think I think actually the art world is turning here. Everybody's looking at what's happening here because I think it will happen.
Yeah, I think, sorry, just to jump in, it's an incredibly exciting time to be working in the region and in particular in Saudi Arabia. The talent, as you said, Sarah, is immense, and it's great to have the privilege to work with emerging artists mid-career and more high-profile artists. And I think what you'll see over the next, even just few years, is just the sheer amount of public art projects that are permanent public art projects that are going to start to be activated and installed within the city. So Riyadh Art, even as an example, 1,000 artworks for the city of Riyadh, just such an incredible vision. And it goes across and touches all different areas and places within society. So amazing artworks along the city streets that will help people navigate their way around the city. There'll be thousands of artworks or hundreds, of artworks in local parks and gardens around the city designed by artists, and then even artworks that help with connecting people and pedestrian bridges over roadways, where an artist has helped inform part of the design, which will kind of help with connectivity around the city. So I think there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of permanent public artwork.
Actually, I just had a thought. There is a lot of opportunity, but it does require bravery to make that decision, to let the artist develop a concept, because we all know in the arts, not everybody will love something. You can guarantee somebody will hate it, but not everybody will comment on it. And so it does come down to putting a structure in place that means that there's a transparency of process where you can understand why an artwork, there's a final design of an artwork, why it's there, even if you don't like it. You can understand its process and why it's relevant to its location. But that does mean to say that, sometimes maybe someone even at the top will have to think, well, I can't stand it, but I know that all of these amazing people that work for me or whatever, or supporting this, they've followed this process through. I understand the story. Let's get it done. So it does require bravery, generally.
I find the question really exciting. It's the complete flip to my experience from Australia working in policy and public art. I trained as a jeweller and then went into sculpture, curating, policy, and consultancy in public art. we couldn't get any temporary art. It was all permanent. Everyone wanted the solid bricks and mortar. And what happened is that because it was permanent, people were frightened of exciting ideas and challenging the status quo. So the artwork really got dumbed down. It was selected by a committee, it was safe, it was a bit bland. And we worked very hard over the years to try and bring this policy, which we called Activate Art in the City, to get temporary art. Because temporary art can be challenging, it can be dynamic, it comes, it goes. If you don't like it, then it's not permanent. We don't have these big issues of, you know, like the Richard Serra works where it goes in and all this public art cry, because it disappears. So it's really exciting to see.
I just feel like we're going from step 1 to step 10, and then skipping 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You know what I mean? So you already have that. So you can afford to be fun, great experiences, and to have things that are fleeting moments, maybe documented for future generations to show them in pictures or in films. Or look, this happened 10 years ago. But I just believe that we really need to focus on a proper infrastructure that would last for generations. It's the funding that we're getting now, which is fantastic, might not be there in 10 years.
It's very true. That's very true. And what's very interesting is that this experimental time in art will hopefully translate into these more permanent works that will give that opportunity to conceptually push some boundaries and find the type of art that you really want. It's a really interesting observation and discussion.
They had Diriyah, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of months ago. None of the artworks are here. They lasted 2 weeks, was it, Sarah? Was it 2 weeks, I think?
Yeah, 3 weeks.
And they're gone.
Still,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the focus, I think, of NOR is a little bit different in terms of it being a temporary public art festival. So it has that different kind of spin to it. So it's only here for a certain amount of time, and sometimes they can be then picked up and placed in a space permanently.
But I do know what you mean. It's all about making sure that we're capturing legacy as we
Yeah.
go along. And
I grew up in the city of Jeddah, and we were surrounded by artwork.
Yeah.
And it affected us indirectly. We grew up looking at beautiful monuments that were, it was a community-based approach. Also, I think it's very unique and very important. And they're there today. I can take my kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at this. There's, so I'm just hoping that that prototype would follow in the other cities.
I mean, Jeddah's a wonderful example where there'll be the love or hate, as well, because I love the roundabouts. However bonkers some of them are that you think, it's Jeddah. You just know it. And I was actually doing some reading about the impact of having the arts in the public realm that that you're aware of from a child, through, and how that influences your thinking, your creative thinking as well, through life, and how that will have a positive impact fully. And there was a small research done where statistically it was proven that, it affected children's abilities and improved their, it was English and maths that they were talking about.
Wow.
And actually then it was about arts education. And there was a study done, and admittedly this was about 5 years ago and UK-based, but that if you have the arts, some sort of considered engagement with arts and creativity, perhaps from childhood, even if it's just an occasional visit into a museum or something, you have a much stronger position in the future workforce. Apparently, any artwork, the statistic was something like, I've written it down, 87% of jobs in the creative economy are either at low or no risk of automation, obviously. with our sort of fourth industrial revolution, but and that's compared to 40% of all other jobs. So bringing this into the public realm, bringing this arts education, sharing it, and creating that, all of those points in between, well, you know, it adds a richness.
And building that kind of creative industry sector and arts ecosystem. And I think, you know, it's growing and growing and growing, and the stronger and stronger that it gets, you can't deny the impacts and benefits that it will have for the community and
I bet
people.
your project, though, people are still talking about.
Which one's that one?
The blue one, sorry, that's
Oh, yeah.
so stuck in my head now. I'm now
have to
saying
share
it's,
some.
it's your project forevermore, but
Some images.
yeah.
Yeah, it was, it's a memorable one that's in my mind, actually.
Any questions? Q&A. Oh,
Oh, I see.
yeah. Questions, comments?
There's also an issue of sustainability of material, which you have a lecture about recently with Austria. They were talking about the sustainability of art and the usage of material. And I don't know if we have anyone from Desert Tax that would like to
Slides on that. Yeah.
about the use of material and Desert Tax and how to survive such.
Well, we all did. We're involved in slight, you know, well,
Different
you
aspects
obviously
of it,
more,
yeah.
different aspects of it, but
Any guidance about sustainability?
I think Desert X, because it's a period of time, there is, again, there's the design and opportunity using the material for a period of time. When you move into the permanent public art, you're actually moving into a fairly major construction project. You know, artworks to last 25, 30, 50 or 100 years have to be built with a, you know, a solid material that will cope with the climate and cope with, you know, that public realm, grime and daily life. So going back to the conversation about ephemeral, one of the interesting things about ephemeral work is that it does allow people to experiment with different materials because they don't have to be built to last. But this idea of sustainability of materiality is something that we've been exploring quite a bit in our ingredients list, looking at what we use and how we use it, particularly, say, with casting metal and the sand that we use and the gases that go in, you know, the whole foundry process. And it's really interesting to start sort of going back to that, you know, or going to that idea of like the cradle to the grave, sort of circular economy of what we start with and what we end with, because everything we do on this planet stays on this planet. You know, it's never going to go away. Every single piece of rubbish that we've ever had is still here. So it's a really quite daunting aspect of everything that we do that
terrifying.
it's quite terrifying, but it's, you know, apart from where they start shooting it up into space, but at the moment it's all still here. So I think we all have that responsibility to think about what we do and how we do it. And that gets quite tricky when you think about permanent works, because it does really require a different type of construction methodology.
Can I ask a question of anybody who may have an answer to it? But and this is my newbie sort of observations, is that there are these wonderful developments, all of which have arts and culture at their heart and doing exciting things. And the ephemeral obviously reaches the broadest audience, people, you know, from every community. But what about arts being taken to those communities, to those harder to reach communities? I'm not aware of any yet. Didn't Bricklab do some work there? Yeah. And that's Jeddah. I'll go and I'll go and do a bit more. But that's Jeddah, that you've all grown up with arts for forever, there, or for a long time anyway. So. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't yet done enough research, so I will sort of go, and actually we're all off to Jeddah. I'll do that, but I feel I'd love to know more about more communities around, and I think that the arts are a way of being able to learn more, but by taking something by the right artists there, not sort of dropping what. Well, I call it parachute art.
Yeah, I call it purchase and plonk.
Purchase and plonk, so not that.
Yeah. It's very broad in terms of the art ecology, that when you're building this opportunity of creativity within a public realm, that it has many different strategies. And often it's the large projects that, of course, people know, but we know it's the fine grain, that granular, everyday work that actually we remember, and we have that attachment to a place that makes us feel part of something. It probably will come over time. There's huge changes in Saudi. It's enormous since 3 years ago since I was here. And it's just so exciting to come back and to see this dynamism happening in terms of expression and discussion. You know, the very fact that the Biennale is here and that people are wanting to talk about ideas, talk about imagination, you know, talk about future of creativity. So this ecology is going to take time. I know from my own experience in policy work, you know, in Australia, we really followed sort of the UK model and the American model, which was around 1% for art. And then that 1% for art helped helped fund getting art into public places through development, and had a lot of development conditions. And then it moved, you know, into other aspects of community art and ways of socially engaged art. And so it spreads its way through. So it's going to be really, really fun and really interesting to watch how art develops within this, you know, the whole psyche of a place.
Well, I went to Abha. Really fantastically beautiful place. I mean, again, I've got off the plane somewhere else in Saudi and thought, but there's something about the essence of Abha that just seems to sort of create, you know, wonderful artists and artistic outputs as well. Yeah. And honey.
No. Yes.
Actually, there are some companies that are really, really good here. Yeah. In
manufacturing, yeah.
It's just that it's like you find out more word of mouth than anything, but there are some very good. Maybe not. I think actually what it is that they've more got these really fine skills in more architectural settings and have transferred their skills into production, but they're of the mindset that they listen to artists, so they're sort of creating artist vision, not their own, and that's but not all materials, you know. But it's.
I think they're definitely building and more, you know, local
I'm sure
companies
as soon as they
coming about.
realise that, you know, there's a requirement for glass, I haven't found yet, I have to say, of scale.
So what the Percent for Art did is it actually created an economy for artists. And we found that, like where I was living in Brisbane, we had a 2% government policy for public art. So every government building over $15 million had to have 2% of the construction budget for public art. And so what it then created was this, this financial economy, this incentive for artists to come to the state because there was work. And there was opportunities and jobs. And so a state that had normally lost all its artists to other states because there wasn't much work for artists, suddenly was attracting all the artists from all down south to come up. And this changed the whole economy of the city and the whole creativity of the city because money started to flow back to artists who actually got jobs.
Because it was a legal requirement.
Because it was a legal requirement. Now, the interesting thing
got
about
2%,
this...
we got 1%.
Yeah, well, we lost the 2% eventually.
Smaller scale
Yeah.
in the UK, but
Yeah.
you know.
But it was a major kickstart of the creative economy for Queensland. One of the things that happened, though, and it's always, you know, the risk of any policy, there's always, you know, the why and the questions of, you know, the unexpected. And some of the unexpected outcomes was artists moving away from their gallery practice into public art, where they were doing more of a design practice rather than an art practice. And so what we were finding is that the actual exhibition process and the exhibition program was starting to lessen off. And so we had to we developed then a policy around more of a curatorium of looking at artworks that were more curated, more to develop more ideas so that we weren't looking at artwork as a design process. Because one of the troubles with public art is that it's often about public design. Because of these percent for arts, it's often and was by committee. And so an artist gets a public art brief, they have to satisfy this brief, and the artwork loses a lot of its power and interest and excitement. So by changing the policy to make it in more of a curatorium, it then became much more challenging and exciting artwork. But it really stimulated the economy, and I'm really intrigued to see how the economy here will be stimulated, because there is a huge investment in art, and when you put that huge investment, you have this huge incentive for people to stay in the arts, to be artists, to actually have a career in the arts where they can afford to stay in the arts. And so I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll really see how that creative industry will start to develop and settle into its very own way of being, which hopefully is not too influenced by other places. Because I think one of the most exciting things about Saudi is it's of itself.
I think also there's an interpretation of the word public art that loses people. They're not quite sure what exactly it means, that it could just be this static sculpture and not all of the things that you've been talking about and delivering. Because if you saw the numbers of people who were in NFT, you know,
I know, we're others.
Exactly. and then when it was this great excitement that, you know, a designer handbag sold, a digital designer handbag sold for more than the physical handbag, that I thought, okay, I'd still rather hold my bag, and I don't care how many people see it. And there's a real divide. Whereas.
But they can buy public art for their what do they call these cities, the digital cities? The stratosphere. What is it called? The metaverse. Yeah,
Oh, the
they can buy
metaverse.
public art for the metaverse.
Metaverse.
Exactly.
I think what's exciting though
Arms were a
is
thing.
once we start to see the different ways in which art is going to be applied to the city and all the different types of typologies and, you know, into the facades of buildings and canopy structures and, you know, into the transit and the train centres. It's just going to be incredible, and it's really going to shift kind of that perception, I think, of public art and what public art means. Yeah.
It does.
There's nothing, there's no monumental, for example, when you go to Paris or London or whatever, there are icons that everybody expects to see, even in Japan. But here, I think it does need to infuse this public art, would help gain this identity.
There's an incredible identity at night that comes alive, though, as you know, as a visitor and coming into the city, that I can see in the way that the lights kind of light up and all the different colours that you experience as you kind of go along the city streets. But yeah, I think art really does help with identity and placemaking and that belonging.
Thank you
Thanks,
all
everyone.
very much, and thank you for engaging the conversation with us. It is so much more enjoyable and valuable